The first thing I noticed wasn't the pain. It was the quiet. Hospital quiet is different from regular quiet. It has weight to it. Machines hum. Somewhere a cart rolls down a hallway, a door opens and closes. But underneath all of that is a stillness that feels like the building is holding its breath, like it's waiting to see if you make it. I was in room 208 of Mercy General in Columbus, Ohio, with 2 cracked ribs, a grade 2 concussion, and a bruised spleen, when my sister walked in smelling like airport and perfume, and something tropical I couldn't name. She had her carry-on in one hand and her phone in the other, and she looked at me the way you look at a problem you didn't expect to have to deal with before your trip technically ended. "The doctor said you're stable," she said. "Not hello. Not thank God. Stable." I closed my eyes and let the ceiling answer for me. "My name is Jolene. I'm 31 years old. I work as a night shift charge nurse at a pediatric hospital in Columbus, and I have spent the last 6 years being the person my family called when things got hard. Not hard for me, hard for them." Let me back up. My brother Tyler is 4 years younger than me and has always been, in my mother's words, gifted. What she meant was handsome and charming in a way that made adults forgive him things they would have corrected in me. He wanted to be an architect. He told people this at every dinner table and every holiday gathering like it was already done, like the degree was a formality. My parents treated it like gospel. The ask started small, the way all asks do when they want to become habits. It was my second year out of nursing school. I just moved into my own apartment, a 1-bedroom in Clintonville with a radiator that clanged, and a landlord who took 3 days to return texts. I was proud of it in the quiet way you're proud of things you built without help. My mother called on a Tuesday. Tyler's tuition was short, just $200. She hated to ask. I was so responsible, she always said that. I said yes. That was a first yes. It opened a door I didn't know I was unlocking. Over the next 6 years, the asks got bigger and the pauses before them got shorter. Tyler's studio supplies, Tyler's laptop, the copay for my father's knee surgery that insurance didn't cover, my mother's car repair, our family trip to Florida that I helped fund because Tyler had never seen the ocean and he'd been working so hard, Tyler's lease deposit when his roommate bailed, their mortgage payment just for 1 month while my father's hours got cut. Just 1 month became 4. I kept a spreadsheet for a while, then I stopped because the number made my hands shake when I looked at it. Somewhere around $48,000 over 6 years if you count the loans they stopped pretending were loans. If you count the groceries and the gas cards and the times I picked up the dinner tab at Applebee's because nobody else reached for the check. I told myself I could handle it. I was a nurse. I knew how to push through. I worked doubles. I picked up overtime on holidays. I skipped vacations. I ate lunch at my desk and dinner standing over my kitchen sink because sitting down felt like time I didn't have. The warning signs were there if I'd been paying attention. Headaches behind my left eye that wouldn't move. My hands shaking at the end of a 12-hour shift in a way they hadn't shaken when I started. I started forgetting small things. A patient's room number, whether I'd already charted a medication. My manager asked once, gentle but careful, if I was doing okay. I said yes and meant it the way you mean things when you're too tired to interrogate yourself. The night of the accident, I was driving home from a double shift. It was February. The roads had been salted but not enough. I remember the light at the intersection turning green and I remember pulling forward and then there was a sound, like the world deciding to rearrange itself. A delivery truck running the light. It hit the driver's side. I don't remember the impact. I don't remember the paramedics. I don't remember arriving at Mercy General. What I remember is the ceiling. That particular shade of hospital white that looks like a color that gave up. The nurse was there when I woke up, had short grey hair and reading glasses pushed up on her forehead. She told me her name was Renee and that I'd been unconscious for 11 hours and that I had 2 cracked ribs, a concussion, and a bruised spleen and that I was very, very lucky. Lucky. People kept saying that word to me in the days that followed. and I kept turning it over in my hands like a coin I wasn't sure was real. "Where's my family?" I asked. My voice came out wrong, dry and smaller than I expected. Renee's face did something careful. "They were here earlier," she said. "Your mother and your sister. They stayed for a little while." "How long?" She adjusted the IV without looking at me directly. "About 40 minutes. Then they had to go." I stared at the ceiling. "My father?" "He didn't come," she said quietly. "I'm sorry." "Where did they go?" This time she did look at me, and in her eyes was the specific kind of gentle that nurses use when they're about to say something that will land badly. "Your sister mentioned a flight, something about Cancún." I let that sit in my chest for a moment. My brother had been planning the trip for months. A destination birthday. He was turning 27 and he'd decided that meant a resort in the Mexican Caribbean with an open bar and a group of his friends and whatever money could be found. My mother had called it a milestone. My father had said Tyler deserved to celebrate. My sister, Cara, who is 2 years older than me and has always been better at choosing herself than I have, said she wasn't going to miss it. I'd been invited in the way you invite someone you don't actually expect to show up, and I hadn't been going to go. I had a shift. I had 2 cracked ribs and a bruised spleen, and my family was at a resort in Cancun for my brother's birthday trip. I stared at the ceiling for a long time. My phone came back to me on the second day. There were texts. "My mother, honey, call when you can." A voice message from my sister saying she tried to reach the hospital, but the hold times were crazy. Tyler had sent a photo of himself at the pool with a drink in his hand and a caption that said, "Wish you were here," with a little sun emoji. Wish you were here. I put the phone face down on the tray table and didn't pick it back up for 12 hours. On the third night, Renee was back on shift. She came in to check my vitals and adjust my pain management, and she paused by the window on her way out. I noticed because she wasn't usually a pausing type. She was efficient, purposeful, the kind of nurse I tried to be. "You've had a visitor," she said. I turned my head. "I don't think I have anyone coming." She clasped her hands. "Not officially. There's been someone in the waiting area. Each night since you were admitted, he doesn't ask to come in, he just sits." I felt something move under my skin. A stranger. Renee looked at me with an expression I couldn't read. "He asked the front desk which room you were in. That's all. He hasn't asked for anything else." "What does he look like?" "Older," she said carefully. 60s maybe. Tall. He brings coffee and he sits, and around 3 in the morning he leaves. I didn't know what to do with that, so I filed it somewhere I could reach later. "He was there again the 4th night." I know because I couldn't sleep and I asked the night aide to check and she confirmed it. "Man in the waiting area, grey coat, coffee from the vending machine. Just sitting." On the 5th night, I asked Renee to ask him his name. She came back 20 minutes later and stood in the doorway and said, "Douglas Hale." The name hit me somewhere behind the sternum, a place that's hard to point to but easy to feel. I knew that name. I knew it the way you know something that was scrubbed from your history before you were old enough to ask questions. My mother had said it exactly once when I was about 15 and I'd found an old photograph in a box in the closet. A man I didn't recognize standing next to a younger version of my mother, laughing. I brought it to her, and her face had done something I'd never seen it do. It went very still and very cold at the same time. "Put that back," she'd said. "Who is that?" "Nobody. A mistake. Put it back." I put it back, and I'd never asked again because in my family, pressing on a sore place just made someone punish you with silence until you learn to stop pressing. Douglas Hale. I lay in that hospital bed with my ribs aching and my head still swimming, and I turned the name over until morning. On the 6th day, I told Renee I wanted to see him. She looked at me for a moment. "Are you sure?" "I'm sure." He came in carefully, the way people enter rooms where they're not certain they belong. He was tall, the way Renee had said, with grey hair and the kind of face that had been worn down by years but not beaten by them. He stopped a few feet from the bed and didn't try to come closer. The silence lasted about 4 seconds. He broke it. "You look like your mother when she was your age," he said. And then, like that sentence cost him something, he looked away. "Who are you to me?" I asked. He exhaled slowly. He looked at his hands, then at the window, then at me. "I'm someone who should have been allowed to know you." That wasn't an answer. Or it was the most honest answer anyone had ever given me, and I just wasn't ready to hear it yet. "How did you know I was here?" He said my colleague mentioned it, not someone I knew well, just someone who knew someone at the hospital and had recognized my name. Small world, Columbus. He'd driven 2 hours from where he lived in Cleveland. "Why?" His jaw moved. "I wasn't going to let you be alone. There are sentences that land and sentences that pass through you. That one landed." He didn't stay long that first visit. 20 minutes. He told me he'd been looking for a way to reach out for years but hadn't known how. That my mother had been very clear a long time ago that certain doors were closed. He said it without bitterness, which made me trust it more than if he'd said it with anger. I asked him to come back the next day. He said he would. He did. My mother returned on day 8. I heard her before I saw her. That particular tone she uses in public spaces, she's decided she has authority over. Bright, a little offended, like the world is perpetually slightly below her expectations. I heard her in the hallway telling someone, "My daughter is in room 208. I need the discharge paperwork." She appeared in the doorway with Kara behind her. My mother's skin was sun-kissed in that way it gets when she spent real time somewhere warm. Her nails were fresh. She looked rested and slightly inconvenienced. "Jolene," she said, too light, too cheerful, the tone she uses when she's decided we're moving past something. "I need you to get dressed." I looked at her. I didn't say anything. She scanned the room. Her eyes stopped on Douglas, who was sitting in the chair by the window with a paperback he wasn't really reading. Her face changed. Not in a small way. The brightness drained out of it like someone had pulled a plug. What she was left with was something I'd never seen on her before. Not directed outward anyway. Fear. Real fear. The kind you can't perform. "What are you doing here?" she said. It wasn't a question. Her voice had gone flat and hard. Douglas closed his book. "Visiting?" My mother's head snapped to me. "What did he tell you?" I kept my voice even. "He told me he'd been here every night since the accident." Her lips thinned. "He doesn't belong here. He has nothing to do with this family." Douglas's voice was quiet and steady. "Whether I belong here is Jolene's choice to make, not yours." My mother stepped forward. The pretense of cheerfulness was completely gone now. She pointed at me. "Get dressed. We're leaving." I looked at her. "Mom." She was already gathering things, my jacket from the hook near the door, my phone from the tray table. "We have things to handle at home. Your father needs—" "I changed my emergency contact," I said. She stopped. 2 days ago, I said, "when I could sit up long enough to fill out the paperwork, you're not listed anymore." Her hand tightened on my jacket. "You can't do that." I already did. The hospital administrator helped me. You don't have decision-making authority over my care. Kara made a sound in the doorway, somewhere between a breath and a word. My mother's face moved through several expressions in quick succession, settling on the one I recognized best. Controlled fury with a layer of wounded dignity over it. "This is because of him," she said, pointing at Douglas without looking at him. "He's been filling your head with things that aren't true." Douglas said nothing. "What hasn't he told me?" I asked my mother. "Because I notice you're not asking what he said. You're asking what he told me. Those are different questions." My mother opened her mouth, closed it. Kara spoke from the doorway, careful. "Mom, maybe we should—" "Be quiet," my mother said. "Then, to me, you don't know what you're doing. You're concussed, you're emotional. You just got out of a very scary accident and you're not thinking clearly." "I'm thinking more clearly than I have in 6 years," I said. "I've had a lot of quiet time this week," I said. 11 days in a hospital room is a lot of time to think. And I've been thinking about $48,000. My mother's jaw tightened. That's not fair. Which part? You know we were going to pay it back. I nodded. I know you said that, and I know you said it before the Florida trip, and I know you said it before the kitchen renovation, and I know you said it before Tyler's lease deposit, and somehow the number kept going in one direction. Kara's face had changed. She was looking at me differently now, like she was doing math she hadn't done before. You had a car accident, my mother said, shifting, the way she shifts when one argument isn't working. We were worried sick. We flew back as soon as we could. You flew back on day 8. We had non-refundable tickets. I stared at her. I had 2 cracked ribs. I was unconscious for 11 hours. The doctor said you were stable. I think I understand now, I said slowly, why that word keeps coming up. My mother took a breath. She was recalibrating. I could see it. She looked at Douglas with naked contempt. Whatever he's told you, whatever story he's given you, he left. He chose to leave. I didn't leave, Douglas said quietly. I was asked to disappear. My mother's voice sharpened. Don't. Then tell me, I said, tell me who he is. Because if he's nobody, like you said, then there's nothing to hide. The room went very still. Renee appeared at the doorway and read the room in the way good nurses read rooms. She stepped inside and stood near the foot of my bed without announcing herself. My mother looked at me, at Douglas, at Kara, at her hands. And then, in a voice so flat it almost didn't sound like her, she said, "He was your father's business partner." A long time ago. They had a falling out. I don't want him around this family. Douglas looked at the window. His jaw was tight. He didn't correct her. He also didn't confirm it. He just sat with whatever truth she'd offered and let me decide what to do with it. I decided later. In the moment, I looked at my mother. I opened my banking app. This account, I said, turning the screen toward her. The one you have the routing number for. I closed it yesterday. Her face shifted. Jolene, the auto-pay for your utilities, the subscription you put in my name that I've been paying for 2 years, Tyler's storage unit, all of it, I said, stopped. Redirected. Done. My mother's voice went soft, in that way that's worse than loud. You can't do this. We need you. I know, I said. That's always been the problem. You would leave us with nothing? You have Tyler, I said. He's gifted. You said so. Kara flinched. My mother looked at me with something I can only describe as genuine disbelief, the kind that comes from a person who has never genuinely considered that the answer would be no. Not from me. Not from the responsible one. Renee spoke from the foot of the bed. I'm going to have to ask you to leave. The patient needs rest. My mother straightened. This isn't over. She walked out. Kara followed her. And just before she cleared the doorway, she looked back at me. I couldn't read her expression. It was too many things at once. When the door closed, the room went quiet in a different way. A good way. The air quality changed. I exhaled. My ribs protested. I pressed my hand against them without thinking, and Douglas leaned forward from the chair, cautious. Do you need me to call someone? No, I said. I just need a second. He settled back. He was good at that, at occupying space without filling it. I noticed it each time he visited. He didn't try to manage the room. He just sat in it. I looked at him. I'm going to need you to tell me the real story at some point. He nodded. Whenever you're ready. Are you my father? The question came out before I decided to ask it. It sat between us like a thing that had been waiting a long time for a table to land on. Douglas looked at me for a long moment. His face was careful and tired and something else. Something that wasn't quite grief, but lived in the same neighborhood. Your mother and I were together, he said, before she met your father. Before she met the man you grew up calling your father. We were together for 3 years, he paused. When she found out she was pregnant, She'd already started seeing him. She made a choice. She told me the baby wasn't mine. And was it? His hands folded in his lap. I don't know, he said honestly. I never knew for certain. She wouldn't allow a test. She told me to move on. I did because I didn't know what else to do. But I never stopped wondering. I stared at the ceiling, the hospital white, the color that wanted to erase things. When did you find out I was here? He told me. Someone who knew someone. He said it again, and this time I heard in it what it actually was. A man who had spent years with a low-level attention on a name in a city, not stalking, not interfering, just aware. Like a radio you leave on in another room just in case. You drove 2 hours, I said, every night. He looked at his hands. I didn't want you to be alone. I was quiet for a while. You know, I said finally, my whole life I thought I was the one in the family who didn't fit right. Like I was assembled from different parts. My brother gets everything easy. My mother smiles at him the way she never quite smiled at me. I told myself I was imagining it, that it was just the responsible one thing, the parentified kid thing. I read enough about it to explain it all away. Douglas was very still. But it was something else too, wasn't it? I said. She looked at me and she saw you. He didn't answer. He didn't have to. 3 weeks later, I was discharged. On my timeline, with my paperwork, with Renee standing at the nurse's station giving me a look that I can only describe as satisfied. Like she'd been waiting to see how this particular story ended. I went home to my apartment in Clintonville. The radiator clanked. My landlord texted immediately as if he'd sensed my return. I stood in my kitchen for a long time without turning the lights on, just letting my eyes adjust. My mother had left 2 voicemails. My sister had texted asking if we could talk. Tyler had sent nothing. I didn't listen to the voicemails. I texted Kara and told her I needed some time. She replied with okay, and then, a few minutes later, I've been thinking about some things. I didn't respond to that either. Not yet. Douglas texted to ask if I'd gotten home safely. I said yes. He said good. That was the whole exchange, and somehow it was the most comfortable conversation I had that day. The following Saturday, he drove down from Cleveland and we sat in a diner near my apartment for 3 hours. He got black coffee. I got tea because my ribs still ached when I breathed too deep, and something about hot tea made it easier. We talked about his life, what he did, that he'd retired from engineering 2 years ago, that he had a dog named Pepper who was elderly and judgmental, that he'd been married once and that it hadn't worked out, that he'd never had other children, that he didn't say that like he wanted sympathy, just like it was a fact he'd arranged a life around. He asked about my work, not the way people ask about nursing when they mean, isn't that hard, and aren't you tired, but actually asked what it was like to be a charge nurse, what it felt like to be responsible for other people's bodies when you'd spent years being responsible for other people's choices and never once your own. I told him things I hadn't told anyone. About the 6 years of money and the spreadsheet I stopped looking at. About the feeling that saying no was a language I'd never been taught. About how I'd looked at my family in that first week in the hospital, the empty chair beside my bed, the text from Tyler with the sun emoji, and felt something shift in my chest. Something that felt like grief and relief at the same time, which was a combination I hadn't known existed before. Douglas listened, the way people listen when they've learned that the most useful thing they can do in a conversation is stay in it. We went dash on the bill, he tried to cover it and I said no, and he accepted no on the first try, which is not nothing. Walking back to my car, I stopped on the sidewalk. The February air had gone grey and sharp in the way it does in Ohio when winter is tired but not done. I don't know what you are to me yet, I said, biologically or otherwise. Douglas stopped beside me. He put his hands in his coat pockets. That's okay, he said. You don't have to know. But you came every night, I said. He looked at the street. Yeah. Why? He was quiet for a moment. Then he said, because I thought about it for 31 years, not knowing. And when I found out you were alone in that hospital, I thought, I'm not going to be another person who doesn't show up. I stood there on the sidewalk with my cracked ribs and my tea receipt in my pocket and my banking app full of closed accounts, and I felt, for the first time in a very long time, like I was standing in exactly the right place. Not because everything was fixed. It wasn't. My mother still believed she had done nothing wrong. Kara was somewhere in the middle, doing the math slowly. My father had not called once. Tyler had texted 3 weeks later asking if I was going to help with his D's renewal, and I had screenshot the text, looked at it for a long time, and then blocked the number. But I was standing on a sidewalk in Columbus in February with a man who had driven 2 hours in the dark to sit in a hospital waiting room with vending machine coffee because he decided 31 years of not knowing was enough. And that was something. It was more than something. Some families are built from blood. Some are built from the people who sit outside a glass door in the middle of the night, choosing every hour to stay. I spent 6 years trying to buy belonging from people who'd already decided I was more useful as a resource than a daughter. And it took a truck running a red light and 11 hours of unconsciousness for me to finally understand that the people worth keeping are the ones who show up when there's nothing in it for them. That's the thing about real love. It doesn't ask you to be useful first. I used to think being responsible was a personality trait. Something I was born with, like my eye color or the way I can't sleep past 6 in the morning no matter how tired I am. It took a truck running a red light and 11 hours of unconsciousness for me to understand that it wasn't a trait at all. It was a role my family had assigned me before I was old enough to negotiate the terms. The thing about cause and effect is that it doesn't care about your intentions. For 6 years, I made choices, each one small, each one reasonable in isolation, that added up to a life I didn't recognize. I said yes to the copay. I said yes to the copay. I said yes to the trip. I didn't go on and fund it anyway. And every yes taught the people around me that no wasn't in my vocabulary. That's not bad luck. That's a pattern. And patterns, once you see them clearly, become a choice you're either making or stopping. What I had to find eventually was the clarity to see it. And clarity, I've learned, is not something that arrives gently. For me, it arrived in a hospital room in Columbus, Ohio, with 2 cracked ribs and an empty chair where my family should have been. There's a particular kind of intelligence that only gets unlocked when everything stops. When you can't work a double shift to avoid thinking. When your phone is out of reach and the ceiling is the only thing to look at. I spent 11 days thinking more honestly than I had in years about the spreadsheet I'd stopped opening. About the word stable and what it meant to the people who used it about me. About the difference between being loved and being useful. Douglas drove 2 hours in the dark to sit in a waiting room with vending machine coffee and a paperback he wasn't really reading. He didn't ask for anything. He didn't announce himself. He just decided that 31 years of staying away was enough. And he showed up. That kind of choice doesn't come from obligation. It comes from something quieter and harder to name. A sense of what's right that doesn't need an audience or a reward. I had spent 6 years around people who kept score of everything they gave me and forgot to count what they took. Sitting across from Douglas in that diner, I understood for the first time what it felt like to be in the presence of someone who genuinely didn't expect anything back. And then there was what I had to do myself, closing the bank account, canceling the autopay, changing the emergency contact. None of it felt heroic in the moment. It felt terrifying, the way the right thing often does when you spent years confusing fear with conscience. But I did it anyway. Not because I stopped loving my family, because I finally understood that continuing to fund a dynamic that was quietly killing me wasn't love either. It was just fear with a prettier name. I think about Renee sometimes, the way she stood at the foot of my bed without flinching when my mother tried to fill the room with noise. "You did good," she said afterward. Simple, steady, the kind of sentence that lands because it doesn't try too hard. I'm still figuring out what Douglas is to me. We don't have a word for it yet, and I've stopped needing one. What I know is that he showed up when it cost him something, and he kept showing up after, and that is the only definition of family I'm interested in carrying forward. The truck that hit my car didn't give me a new life. It just stopped me long enough to see the one I already had clearly. Sometimes that's all it takes, a full stop, a ceiling to stare at, enough quiet to finally hear yourself think.